Hi, I'm Zvi Biener. I'm an associate professor here in philosophy. My main research concerns the metaphysical and methodological implications of the new sciences of the 17th century. I investigate that along two main avenues or in regards to two main questions. The first one is how different applications of mathematics to nature in the new sciences of the 17th century resulted in different visions of empirical knowledge, and how despite the broadness of those visions, they were aimed at solving very specific physical, what today we might call scientific problems. The other avenue concerns how these new accounts of empirical knowledge eschewed more traditional metaphysical and epistemological questions, in particular questions about matter theory and fundamental ontology. I've explored these themes in relation to Hobbes, Descartes, Galileo, and Aristotle, but mainly Newton. My work on Newton goes to temper a hagiographic image of Newton as philosopher that has gained prominence in the past few decades. On that image, Newton was an equally adept philosopher, particularly metaphysician, and physicist. I argue against that Newton was far less philosophically sophisticated than it seems. In fact, he mainly tried to avoid philosophical questions, but the way in which he tried to avoid them was novel and instructive and had much to do with the overall shape of the transformation of natural philosophy in the 17th century. There's far too many works to cite here, and I wouldn't know who to choose, but I could mention two people. The first is J.E. Maguire, who really pioneered thinking about the work of Newton metaphysically, and his work has been echoed many, many times in the past few decades, but never matched. And more recently, George Smith, who really opened up the field of studying Newton's methodology in a way that was unparalleled before. What the two of them have in common is an extreme attention to detail. And that's what I strive to bring to my work as well. The devil is in the details, and you could learn a lot from paying attention to them, and that shines through clearly in their work. The other work, now that I think about it, is probably, if I was to pick a single work, is Richard Rorty's Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. I haven't looked at that book since I was an undergrad because I'm afraid I would revise my own opinion about it. But it was extremely influential to me when I read it at 21. At that point, all I had read were histories of philosophy that were teleological in nature, that really portrayed the arc of philosophy as leading from the beginnings to where we are today as kind of a process of discovering truth, of getting closer and closer to truth, as a kind of scaffolding to get to the present. And those were kind of disappointing because really, if the history of philosophy is just scaffolding, then we don't really need to think about it. We just need to think about where we are today. Rorty's book, in distinction to that, painted a much richer history of philosophy. It portrayed history as not a teleological arc, but one that is defined by fits and starts and wrong turns and contingent maneuvers. And that made where we are today much more interesting to me and really showed how we could learn about our current philosophical predicament by learning about history in the way that just wasn't, clear to me before. And I think that's a great way to think about the history of philosophy. I think what's special about our department is how collegiate we are. Everyone here is happy when someone else does well, and that includes both faculty and students. In relation to students in particular, we treat you guys as equals immediately. As you know, collaboration between faculty and students is very common here. We don't treat you as if you will become philosophers at some point in the future, but you are philosophers now. We listen to what you have to say, and we work with you on trying to express what it is that you say better. I think that's pretty special, and I love that. There's two parts of that question. There's doing a PhD at UC, and then there's doing a PhD in philosophy. I'll start with the second one. How do you know if doing a PhD in philosophy is good for you? If you can't imagine doing anything else, that's when it's good for you. If it's one of several options for you, you could think about those other options. Doing a PhD in philosophy is hard. It's not the easiest job to get. It's not getting easier. People who do philosophy love doing philosophy. If you're one of those people, then it's the right move for you. But if you don't love doing it, then it's going to be just less than pleasant. Why you should do it in UC? Because we're a great place to do philosophy. There's a lot of people here who are interested in different facets of philosophy. We work well with students. We think part of the educational process is both professionalizing you to be your own philosophers, but working with other philosophers. Collaboration in philosophy is becoming more and more common. And I think we do that from the ground up here. From the minute you hit the ground, we get you used to working in that way. And I think that's really great. I think I would either be an engineer and an architect, and I vacillate between those two things. I like the engineering mindset. I like solving problems. What I think I would have loved about architecture is that kind of like academic work in philosophy, especially philosophy of science, which a lot of us do here, is that it combines technical knowledge with creativity. And I think that's what I like about what I do, is that there's a technical side in solving particular philosophical problems and thinking about, especially in philosophy of science, the contents of scientific theories. And that gets to be technical and detailed, but the way you give expression to your findings could have a lot of creativity and art to it. And I think architecture also combines those two things, and I think that would have attracted me to it. My favorite book when I was a teenager was Isaac Asimov's Foundation, the whole Foundation series. I actually read it again just recently because of the TV show that came out that is, by the way, nothing like the book at all. But I reread it again, and it's very much a 1950s piece of work. It's fairly sexist. The arc of the book is really just different people mansplaining different things to one another. It's kind of funny from a 21st century perspective. But the grand vision that Asimov had for really the universe, the galaxy, was stunning. And it's stunning to me now, right? He imagined everything about this new world and about a huge sweep of history. I think it takes place over 1,000 years, if not more. And being able to do that, given what I later found was my interest in history and telling these long narrative arcs, was great. So I'd recommend that if you haven't read it. A very similar book recently was The Three-Body Problem, and in general, I think it's Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Liu Cixin, I think. It also is very similar to Foundation in the sense that it tells this broad arc of the history of the Earth. And while there's lots of similarities, it also tends to be like, it's a little sexist and a little mansplaining between characters. People say things that you didn't think people would actually say, but the grand vision is amazing. And especially the scientific imagination in that book is great. I mean, the science fiction part is fantastic. And if you're at all into science, it's highly recommended reading.